The Edmonton Oilers were trailing 3-1 in game number 1 of the Stanley Cup Final to the Florida Panthers. They couldn't get anything going on offense, but slowly but surely they worked their way back into the game and won in overtime. On today's edition of Locked On Oilers, why this year's team is different.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Victory Thursday, Game 1 victory of the Stanley Cup Final edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money, where you can take control of your finances. And if you use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com, you'll get 50% off your first year's subscription. So on today's jam-packed edition of Locked On Oilers, we have so much to get to. We're going to start with our opening segment, just what that whirlwind of emotions was like. And I'm going to do my best to be coherent, but God, I have so many thoughts and I have so many tangents I want to peel off, but we'll start there. The whirlwind of emotions. Our second segment, we'll pivot to talking about what worked so well for the Oilers tonight, especially as the game wore along, why it was reminiscent of something that broke through in the Kings series and the Golden Knights series. And then we'll tie a bow on this show talking about why it's so vital that Leon Draisaitl got on the sheet tonight and why him and Connor were as splendid as ever. So to start things out, these opening games of a playoff series generally go one of two ways. Either the first 10 minutes are chaos, utter unhinged chaos, scoring chances, big hits, guys taking numbers, trying to ingratiate themselves, trying to get their feet under them, especially after a multi-day layoff like you had going into this series where both teams had almost a full week worth of time to just kind of recharge. And the Oilers opened the scoring very early. Leon Draisaitl got his name on the sheet. Last year, Leon didn't score a single goal in the Stanley Cup Final, was dealing with a litany of injuries, including a broken rib and finger. And to just get on the sheet, to score first, it's not a guarantee you're going to win, but it's a really nice way to get everybody a little calm. And I think you keeping the crowd in the game a little bit longer. I think everybody else up and down the bench kind of getting the feeling like in Rocky IV when Drago starts to bleed. Okay, yeah, the Panthers are a good hockey team. Yes, they've given us a hard time, but we're a good hockey team too. We can make something happen here. And that's why scoring first was so essential to getting their feet under them. And then slowly but surely, the Panthers do what the Panthers do. They start to squeeze the life out of you like Homer wrenching Bart's neck. It becomes a slow, agonizing death. And at 3-1, I didn't feel like this game was over, but it felt like something was going to need to dramatically swing the Oilers' way if they were going to get back in the game. And a slap shot from Victor Arvidsson at a funky angle with a moving screen in front is exactly the type of funky play you need if you want to get back in a game where the other team is really good. And make no mistake about it. Yes, the Oilers won game number 1, and it is not news to say, hey, the other team might win some games in a best-of-7 series in the Stanley Cup Final. You can feel good about this. You can even get a little braggadocious. If you want to feel good about it, by all means, you're not on the team. But the guys on the team, they know one game is not the end goal here. It is to win 3 more of the next 6 games and take home that trophy. But we got a long way to go till we get there, miles to go before we sleep. And talking about this game and trying to do it justice in just a 30-minute podcast is going to be a challenge. I'm going to be honest with you. Based on this game, I feel like I could do 4 hours of content off of just that game. I think something that weirdly kept sticking with me as this game was going along was just how much energy Vasily Podkolzin and Kapanen had. And look, nobody's mistaking those guys for all-stars. Nobody's saying they're essential components. But when you only get 11, 12, 13 minutes a night, you got to do whatever you can to try and make an impact, to try and find a way to be as noticeable as you can. And when you only play 11 or 12 minutes per game, maybe you're going to have a little more juice than everybody else who's playing a little more regularly, getting that every third shift rotation later in a close game. And Podkolzin ultimately is the guy who forces the delay of game penalty that sets up the Oilers game-winning goal in overtime. So I think it's really fitting that Podkolzin ultimately gets an assist by proxy for forcing that delay of game penalty from being such a menace on the forecheck for the previous 75, 76 minutes of this game. And when you have guys that are in those highly specialized roles who are only going to get 11 to 14 minutes per night, maybe they kill penalties, maybe they sneak onto a second power play in the case of a Corey Perry, or in Corey Perry's case, a first power play because Zach Hyman's hurt. But man, if you're getting contributions up and down the lineup like this, where Victor Arvidsson, who started the game on your fourth line, scores a goal, and you get a goal from Mattias Ekholm, who is as good as he is not known for his goal scoring. But at that point, when the Oilers tie the game on the Ekholm goal, I really started to feel it. I really started to feel the ground shift under them, because for large stretches of that game, the Oilers just could not get anything going. And the Panthers, to their credit, played some incredible neutral zone defense, played some great defensive zone defense, and really did a masterful job of corralling the Oilers to the outside. Of as soon as the Oilers would gain the offensive zone, there would be a defender, whether it was an actual defenseman or a defensive forward playing defense, stepping up, disconnecting the puck from the puck carrier, forcing the puck carrier to move the puck laterally. And of course, that creates counterattack opportunities. And you saw the Panthers find ways to create, I think, one of the big storylines coming out of this game. And questions I have is, how are the Oilers going to do a better job in the face-off dot? And usually face-offs are like the last on my chief of concerns because they don't have a strong correlation to possession. But the Panthers did such a good job in their offensive zone faceoffs, running set plays off of tie-ups, overlapping forwards, creating space for shooters. And as much as I don't think faceoffs matter a whole lot on a season-long basis, I do think in a best-of-7 series, if one team is going to continuously win offensive zone faceoffs and create high-danger chances off of them, that is something worth addressing. And then real quick, the last point I wanted to hit on in our opening segment, which is just kind of me word-vomiting all of the emotions I've felt over the last 4.5 hours or so. But that's why we do this. Games like that are why I love this sport. It's why I do 3 different podcasts throughout the course of the week talking about hockey, because there's nothing else in the world that feels like that overtime game winner. And as soon as that puck got over to Leon and I saw Bob trying to push as hard as he could to get to the opposite post, I stood up and I screamed, because I knew Leon wasn't going to miss that. And every now and then you have those little out-of-body experiences, and that's only one game. As a fan, you can enjoy it a little bit more than they can. I, for one, try to keep my feet on the ground and say, okay, it's one game, 3 of the next 6, 500 hockey rest of the way. That's doable. But at the same time, man, that was incredible. And that was one of the best games the Oilers have played all year. And like we keep talking about, and the everydayers have heard me say, you keep getting better as the playoffs go along. You're going to be playing hockey for a long time. And we are in the first week of June, and the Oilers have a 1-0 series lead, something they never did in last year's Stanley Cup Final, have a series lead. We are going to take our first break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, I'm going to explain what the Oilers did so well as this game wore along to start breaking down the Panthers and ultimately prevail in overtime. So be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much money I was wasting on takeout and food and just junk food at the gas station and stuff I didn't really need. Now I'm budgeting smarter and saving more. Managing your money has never been easier, and you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and if you're like me, plan out something long-term, finally paid off a vacation I'm very much looking forward to in August. Monarch helped me set up my financial planning. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year subscription. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Victory Thursday, Game 1 win of the Stanley Cup Finals edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. And man, that was some incredible hockey, and the back and forth, the ebbs and flows. And look, it's one game. That Panthers team is so good. I was so unbelievably impressed with the ability they have to just keep coming at you over and over and over again. Whether it's Reinhart, it's Bennett, it's Barkov, it's Kachuk, it's Verhaeghe, it's Marchand, it's Luosterainen, it's Seth Jones or Ekblad or Mikkola jumping up in the play. It's Nate Schmidt who to show you how brain poisoned I am with hockey and how insane that game is seared into my brain. There was a sequence towards the end of the third period, it might have been in the overtime, where the puck was about to come out of the zone at the bottom of the screen towards the left offensive zone if the puck was in the left end. So I think that was the third period, if I remember correctly. And Schmidt went almost fully perpendicular, to the blue. No, parallel. He went almost fully parallel to the blue line as a means of keeping the puck in the offensive zone and whipped the pass across in a way that just I hadn't thought, or frankly, I don't think I had seen another defenseman read the play that way. And I was so thoroughly impressed that Nate Schmidt, who signed close to a veteran minimum deal to be a sixth defenseman on a Florida Panthers team, is capable of playing at that high of a level. And look, let's be clear here. The Oilers unequivocally answered the bell. The Panthers were winning this game 3-1, and the Oilers busted their butts to get back in this game. You got goals from Victor Arvidsson and Mattias Ekholm, two guys who don't score all that often, and you found a way. Leon gave you two. Connor had a presence in this game, and man, when I think about what went right, number one, for the most part, and the most important difference this year versus last year through one game is a lack of hope plays, and that's a good thing. When I say hope plays, and I'm stealing that from Mike Sullivan, the former Penguins coach and now the Rangers head coach, and a hope play is when a player moves the puck and hopes their teammate is going to be able to make a play on it. And the Oilers had to resort to that at points. They used the long flip a lot in this game of just trying to relieve pressure in any way they could. And I'm not a huge fan of the long flip as a consistent ploy, because I do think doing all the work in the defensive zone only to turn the puck over intentionally, or at least concede full control of the puck, isn't the most efficient way of playing. I do understand why the Oilers needed to utilize it at points, just to absorb some of the pressure and frankly, to buy their defenders some time, because that Panthers forecheck is unrelenting. And I wrote that down in my notes here over on my iPad, and I'm going to skim down to them just real quick. With 8 minutes to go in the overtime, I wrote down, how do the Panthers sustain this? And when you are playing that full tilt, that much of the game, it has to start to wear on you at some point. But there the Panthers are, that dive bombing forechecker trying to force you to move the puck sooner than you're ready to. And it is one of the most effective team philosophies we've seen. I mean, this team's in the Stanley Cup Final for the third year in a row. And to the Oilers' credit, they found weaknesses. They took advantage of opportunities. And I am sure there will be adjustments on both sides, but tonight in this game, the Oilers played pretty good defensively against a great Florida team. And I think you would probably say the first Sam Bennett goal where he's falling on Skinner, you probably can eliminate that play and you feel really good about this game at large. I do think for the first time these playoffs, I felt John Klingberg looked a little slow for the play, but that's also because Florida is just the fastest team in the NHL, top to bottom. And him and Wallman got better as the game went along. I think Nurse probably doesn't need to be killing penalties anymore. I think I would like to see Ekholm, Bouchard, Wallman, and Kulak. I think if you need another guy there, you probably don't want to play Ekholm with Bouchard together on the penalty kill as well. You probably want to separate that. But when you have the options the Oilers do, you probably can afford to really just have Nurse focus on those 5-on-5 minutes. And frankly, the one Panthers power play goal, that's kind of what we talked about on yesterday's show where we broke out the dry erase board and we were talking about that back door. I mean, that one-timer is as wide open as it's going to be because everybody is shading towards the one side. Now, the play doesn't originate from the net mouth the way I had diagrammed it yesterday, but the philosophy, the principles are still the same. That puck gets out high. That offensive player has the back door and they're able to shoot and get a pretty clear lane at that shot. So the one last thing I do want to get in on what worked well in this game, and I do think it's important to say it this way. The Oilers at 3-1, I'm not going to say could have phoned it in or turned it off, but at 3-1, most people would have understood, hey, you got to save some energy for game 2. And they kept pushing. And to their credit, in that overtime period, they were the team that looked fresher. They kept icing the puck. It didn't matter. They've pressured Florida into a ton of icings in overtime. Ultimately, it was a forecheck pressure that created the delay of game that set up the power play that they won the game on in overtime. I give oodles of credit to Vasily Podkolzin, to Kasperi Kapanen, to Evander Kane, who was hitting everything in sight in this game like a lunatic. And I'm not saying that was the difference between winning and losing, but when you're on the margins and you can impact the game that infinitesimally small way over and over and over again in your minimal opportunities, that bodes really well for how you view yourself as a player, making the most of your opportunity. And ultimately, if everybody's playing at a really high level, A, you have a good team, and B, that sets a standard. When everybody is playing with that level of commitment and that level of intensity, you don't want to be the schmuck who's phoning it in for a shift in the middle of the second period. Of course, Stanley Cup Final, professional athletes, millions of dollars. I'm not accusing anyone of phoning it in. I'm just saying it's hard to stay focused 100% of the time, 100% of the time. So we are going to take our second and final break on today's show. I'm going to wax poetically about Leon Draisaitl for about 8.5 minutes on the other side of the break. So if that's your kind of thing, be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Victory Thursday, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. And tonight, I got myself a nice reminder that as much as I have made the last week and a half about Connor McDavid, the great Canadian hockey player mantle, legacy, greatest of all time, I did not do a good enough job of emphasizing just how good Leon Draisaitl has been and how essential he is to the Oilers, both team individually this year and the overall direction of their franchise. I think I was very guilty of that, and I can put my hand up and say I didn't do a good enough job of highlighting Leon's role in all of this and what this would mean for him. I mean, we're talking rarefied air, someone who's won a Hart Trophy, should win his second Hart Trophy this year. I know Nikita Kucherov won the Ted Lindsay, the Players MVP today. I should say yesterday on Wednesday, but Leon was tremendous tonight. And that first goal, The Oilers flip that puck in, and he wins a foot race, and he negates an icing. He absorbs 2 massive hits. He regathers himself. The Oilers still have the puck in the offensive zone. They get a big rebound that juts out to him, and he hammers it. And the Oilers are in business. They set the tone. And I said this at the open of the show, and I do think it's worth mentioning again. He didn't score in the Stanley Cup Final last year. Leon was dealing with a broken rib and a broken finger. His mobility was limited. He was playing a lot with McDavid. He was playing a lot with Dylan Holloway, and they were really burning the candle at both ends by the end of the Stanley Cup Final. And I don't think Leon's the type of guy where his confidence is really going to ebb and flow all of that much because he's so good. But I do think it was important to just get on the sheet. Get your feet under you. Okay, I'm here. I can do this. It's not hard, but I needed to do it for myself. And you start there. And then you start to build outward from there. The responsibility and the expectation you have. Okay, we're trailing 3-1. I'm going to have to play more. I'm going to have to play with Connor. I keep getting thrown out of the face-off circle. I need to keep my cool. I can't be barking at the referees. I can't try and make this more than it is. He drew the one penalty, drew the high stick. I think it was Evan Rodriguez who had high sticked him at the one point. And Leon had a really strong game tonight. And one of the things I always find remarkable about Draisaitl is he's a better playmaker than he is a goal scorer. But by necessity, he's evolved into an elite goal scorer. And I think it's a really beautiful representation of just what type of person he is, because there are a lot of guys who, no, I do this, I'm good at this, I'm going to stay doing this. And you have truly great players like Draisaitl who say, okay, we need to score more goals. I can do that. I'm not as good at that as I am facilitating and setting up goals, but I will make it happen. I can do that. And he led the league in goals this year. He had 2 tonight in game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, and really kind of sets the energy tone. And yes, McDavid is the straw that stirs the drink, you know, the Reggie Jackson, Thurman Munson quote from way back in the day. He's the one who does the zone entries on the power play. He's the one who does the jitterbug highlight reel plays that go viral. Leon is a meat and potatoes, tough-nosed, big-bodied, you're not getting the puck away from me type of guy. And there just aren't a lot of these in the NHL. And you add his frame and size to his agility, which I do think doesn't get as much credit as it should. He's very good at bobbing and weaving through traffic, even though he doesn't have the raw foot speed of a Connor McDavid. And then you get the goal scoring, which has developed. And I do think it's largely a byproduct of strong positioning. I feel he is consistently in the right place. And some of that is a product of playing with McDavid at times, especially on the power play. I do think, and I forgot to mention this earlier, but talking about the power play, it did come to mind. You did see the absence of Zach Hyman come up in game 1 here during that 4-on-3 where Corey Perry was the one who had taken the penalty before that had made it a 4-on-4, and then the Panthers took a penalty to make it a 4-on-3. The Oilers didn't have a net front guy who was right-handed, and they played Ryan Nugent-Hopkins there, but the angles weren't as good for the one-timers and for redirections and for the passing lanes. And I'll be curious to see if a similar situation arises, if maybe a Victor Arvidsson gets a look there, maybe even, I don't think they would play Kapanen in there. I think maybe Evander Kane could get a look, but as a lefty, you want to have one of your 4 forwards on your power play be right-handed just for the angles. The angles matter so much on power plays because so much of their value is in being able to play the one time, whether it's a one-time pass or a one-time shot. And the better angles you can create, the more handedness you have, the better the angles you can create. I mixed up my words there. Sorry about that, but they had a hard time really creating good looks, and a lot of Nugent-Hopkins sweeping at the puck like a broom. And look, I'm not going to get on Nuge. I thought he was fine tonight. I thought for the most part, I don't think anyone on the Oilers really had a bad game tonight. Sure, you would like some things to be a little bit smoother. You would like some of these guys to catch a break. Kapanen had the breakaway, Bouchard had the breakaway. Trent Frederick had that shot at the net front get robbed by Bobrovsky going post to post. But in a game like this, where you were down 3-1 at one point, and the Panthers, I think if I remember correctly, had won like 23 straight games when they were up 2 goals in the playoffs going back to 2022. So the Oilers really did something notable here. And there's a long way to go. And I might say that 1,000 times between now and the end of this series, because in a Stanley Cup Final, in a singular game, it is not over until it's over. And even though it does get late early out there, it's not over until it's over. And you got a great representation of that tonight. That Arvidsson goal, why? Why does that go in? The Ekholm goal, McDavid pulls 3 guys below the goal line, and then Leon. Leon, who does not get the respect he deserves on a national level. And I've been pounding the drum since like December that he should win the Hart Trophy. Even if he doesn't, I think he's got a strong argument that he deserved to. I think you saw the full scope of his value tonight. I think that first goal is such a great encapsulation of his full range of talent that he was able to win a foot race. He absorbed 2 massive hits. He got back up. He put himself in position to score off a rebound. And because he's such a dangerous player, he opens up space for his line mates. And because he's such an elite player, him and McDavid have the twin synergy. Excuse me, I almost said psychosis. That's not the right word. Twin synergy, where they're able to play so well off of each other. And that was the last point I wanted to get in before we wrap up. You saw it as the third period and the overtime went along. You saw Connor and Leon overlapping. You saw Bouchard overlapping with both of them. Just circles at the top. Just circles at the top of the offensive zone. Put those Florida defenders in conflict. Make them pick who they need to go with and go from there. The Oilers played a really good hockey game from midway through the second period through overtime. And they deserve a lot of credit for rebounding, showing the ability to respond to adversity, to not get lost, and more importantly, they showed that Florida has weaknesses. As good as Florida is, you can beat them. They do bleed. They are human. That'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please take an extra second, leave a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell. Get a notification whenever new content goes live. Let me know who impressed you the most tonight in game number 1. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. But before I get you guys out of here, be sure to check out Locked On NHL, where Hunter Hodes and I will talk in depth about game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, and Locked On NHL Game Night, breaking down each game as we go. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.